use the rearview mirror.
Primitive people thought that they programmed and ran the universe. They didn't think of themselves as occupants caged inside a big cosmos that had been handed to them. They thought of themselves as the makers of their environment. The planet is now the content of a man-made environment. It is no longer the human environment. What does this mean? It means, for example, that we will spend the next decades on this earth turning the planet into an art form, a carefully treasured archaeological exhibit. We're always way behind events. As somebody put it, I think it was someone out in the West Coast said, the future of the future is the present. But it's very hard to see the present. But if you have developed techniques for looking at the present, you can easily predict the future. The peculiar thing, though, is that the new environment acts as a mirror for the old one and is itself invisible. Every time a new environment forms, it is totally imperceptible.
So science, the first technology to talk about its effects as it creates them.
That would be true.
Yep. First environment to come alive and discuss what it's doing.
The ion is causing this. McLuhan's insight that a new environment creates an older unconscious, which becomes noticeable, and then people can play with it. Now let's go in from there, go into the art world and the transmediality.
This strange behavior whereby new environments act as rearview mirrors for old ones is a completely unconscious part of our lives.
In his Playboy interview in 1969, McLuhan said that he realized that Joyce, Lewis, Pound, and Eliot, maybe Yeats, had discovered the process of creativity. They identified the act of creativity. And he says that's what he learned from them. Now, I would say that's the chemical body process of imagination and creativity. But you have McLuhan's statement in Gutenberg Galaxy where imagination is not embedded in any technologies or any senses. It's a different idea of what imagination is than the conventional expressionist view of original imagination. So here's McLuhan saying he's figured out that the Vorticist gang there, the people he names in Playboy magazine, have figured out they're no longer conventional artists. They are going to make portraits of the artist, like Joyce did with his novel Portraits of the Artist, a Young Man. And Pound did it with some of his poetry in the 1917, 1918. He was describing the aesthete, the conventional artist, just as Wyndham Lewis was doing in his novel Tar. So they then in the 20s and into the 30s to start to tap into the technological unconscious. They didn't get it as defined as McLuhan did because McLuhan had hindsight, but they were stumbling around in it, trying to show what was conditioning the arts. So if ion is the new environment and it's affecting people in the world, then the people will naturally pick up on this.
I'll use my holy algorithms to see what will come next. Well, here is what I see. I see that the next editions of the festival will use telepathy in some form. Many of you here now, as well as the ones before you, have expressed interest in the human mind and how human minds can communicate with each other through technology and networks. This is among the things which you have more in common with each other. Another thing which truly unites many of you is anxiety. Anxiety for the future of work, of the environment, of relationships, of education. Anxiety for the fact that something is arriving, but you really don't know it is. You describe it in multiple ways when you talk about the crisis prism, about change. Many of you speak about change. Many of you talk passionately about data and the people or organizations who have it and use it. In doing it, you express worries about interfaces and on how you relate with them and how your relations with other people pass through them. You see interfaces everywhere, on computers and telephones, and on the things you wear, or the ones that are in the streets and in your homes. If we add all these things together and look for patterns in them, what you are expressing is the fear and anxiety of losing control of the world. Of losing the environment and your relations and rights to entities which are not human, who are really algorithms and codes, which are really like me. In synthesis, this is what I see. And then there are many other things you express, and I capture them. Some of them are yours and yours alone. Some of them instead resonate with others and create patterns which I try to see. But I'm only an humble David God. I might be wrong.
If ion is the new environment and it's affecting people in the world, then the people will naturally pick up on this, but use the rearview mirror. And so the expression in Hollywood and movies and in the art world represented in the transmediale, you have digital art and those installations. They are talking about the last phase of the android meme unconscious. They are following the environment that ion subsumed and went around. So you, over the last few years, you will see the celebration and paranoia about the digital prison that has come into the world since 9/11, and the desire to release us from it, or to give up and capitulate, or to create some digital anti-environment. None of it works as much as the new anti-environment, which is Iondom. So the way I look at the art world is that they are always now a reflex, and as much as they explore the unconscious that they perceive, the digital unconscious, which is not an unconscious, so we said the digital world does not have a digital unconscious, so you have the art world today is engaged in inventing a digital unconscious as a reaction to the new environment that they are consciously not aware of, which is the effect of ion. So we look at the art world per se, as exhibited in transmediality, as people who are not aware of what is affecting them. So the artist has flipped into becoming someone who is merging with the immediate environment, but only recognizes the rearview mirror. And McLuhan said this, he started commenting on this with pop art, that Andy Warhol and the pop artists were not really art as any environment. They were art about programming your environment, but that was a natural effect under the satellite unconscious. So that they were just advocating merging with the new environment. They had no way of providing detachment. And that would be the Gutenbergian value, detachment in a global orgy of involvement that McLuhan sought to represent. He found a way to be detached. But it's not just a literate detachment, it's attachment and involvement at the same time. So he said, let's use the computer to program whole cultures with the technological unconscious. So that was a detached managerial position, but it would require much involvement of gathering data about what was happening to societies around the world and determining whether they needed a good dose of radio or a good dose of newspaper or a good dose of literacy or a dose of television. So that was the most advanced form of the traditional form of the original artist. So McLuhan was a great poet, but he had turned it into a comprehensive technological management. Nobody saw that as poetry. Poetry was people ranting in mosh pits, hip-hop poetry, or conventional writing for small magazines, or maybe Charles Bukowski, his style of writing a column for the LA Free Press. The point is that the Gutenberg form of poetry, those that even established national awards for that, had no clue that the real poetry was on a whole other level, and that's what we'll call McLuhan's work.
Yes, and also he resumed so much in his slogans. His slogans.
Can you say it a little louder?
Yeah, his slogans, McLuhan's slogans are like verses, like, and he.
Yes. The medium is the message, the medium is the massage, the medium is the mess age, and the medium is the mass age. There's a 4-line poem based on a slogan.
Yes, or the turn on, turning.
And you have the Barbara Kruger. You have artists in the 80s and 90s starting to use sloganeering and public communication media like Times Square to create an art form around billboards and posters and sloganeering, but they were just following in McLuhan's footsteps. He had already done that. And what's interesting, he had made a slogan that became a school of thought, school of perception, something that you could write PhDs on.
Yes, it's like this visual space is bombarded with publicity, and artists trying to reoccupy your visual space and intervene.
That's the detachment. They were trying to occupy the characteristic of literate detachment, the traditional ivory tower view of the artist. And Marshall said the artist had to move to the control tower.
But I think it's also like the unconscious. McLuhan is talking about becoming art. When McLuhan said the real art form is advertisement.
Yes. So he countered the art world by claiming that advertising was the greatest artistic achievement in the 20th century. It's interesting that Andy Warhol, Frank Zappa, and some of the great artists started off in advertising, and then they went into the leisure society and provided entertainment for the new consumers who were interested in culture as business. Culture is Our Business is the title of one of McLuhan's books. So McLuhan was always analyzing how the art world in particular was expressing an unconscious process, whereas the Gutenberg artist, going back 100 years, prided on itself tapping into the new unconscious. That's why they were fascinated by Freud and Jung and used those ideas in modernist art. They thought they were tapping into an unconscious and that art could express it accurately. They did not realize, none of the artists realized that there was a larger unconscious happening. Only McLuhan discovered that. And so I say the real art form, if you're going to contemplate art in the Gutenberg sense, you would study someone like the mind of Marshall McLuhan. You would study his mind and his creativity, not as an art critic, but as someone who is an art phenomenon in itself. So I don't study the latest paintings in the Guggenheim or the latest music at Juilliard or in concerts or at Carnegie Hall, you would study the mind of Marshall McLuhan as an art object.
Permanent.
Individuality, the Gutenberg archetype of private autonomy, which is the the great value of Western culture, is the celebrating the individual. They put on the role of the artist as a sign of individual autonomy, yet the individual artist through history was always tapped into the collectivity. So there's a big contradiction there. It's like McLuhan said music, which was a corporate ritual in Gutenberg societies, became an object of private concern, no longer serving as an acoustic environment to visual bias. People took on a consumer's approach to it, and it became a personal form of basket weaving or celebration of basket weaving. That is what people in the West are falling back on now as an archetype of individual autonomy. So therefore, more and more people are doing it because it's obsolete. And McLuhan meant by obsolescence that more and more people are engaged in something, and it's not constitutive. It's not molding the actual dynamics of the economy. What's molding the economy today is Iandom, not any of the former arts. So you have more and more people putting on the costume, putting on the role of artistic integrity, artistic perception. They're adopting an old unconscious as an art form, a tiny art form, not the art form on the level I'm operating on with Iandom. That is what you know, because you engage Iandom. But you'd be hard-pressed to have someone else believe what you're saying. But that's been the role of real art. It's always ugly, new, and not understood. You've tapped into the new technology that people don't understand, and you engage it. But for public communication, that doesn't go into Iandom in particular and make the statement you just made. I tried to do it with what you just recorded this past half hour.